teddy bear you saw as we opened up has a little history to it. Probably no toy you have had that long looks that good. I know mine doesn't. But Jane, tell us a little bit about all these toys.
Well, first of all, even though a little beyond the day, you mentioned the 12 days of Christmas, and so this should count, so that we can wish everybody a Merry Christmas still. And a Happy New Year. Well, this teddy bear, as you say, has been with me for a long, long time, almost 90 years. And once we are past 90 years, of course, our teddy bears get older too.
Yes, they do.
And this little girl, I'm going to jump the order of things here today, but this lovely little girl with her ice skates was a toy of my mother's. My mother was born in 1888.
Really?
And so this was a toy of hers. And it's a little lady with a beautiful bisque face, you know, that unglazed porcelain, lovely. And this is just a little padded like little cotton batting, and her skates are too big for it. And if I had a nickel for every time I pretended going skating with this little girl, being outside, you know, and carrying her in my pocket, surprising she survived, we could all retire to the Caribbean. But it is a splendid time of year to think about toys. And we're thinking about toys today that use the imagination, not just toys that require
nothing to just punch a button and let it go. Right.
We will touch some that are mechanical maybe, but not that. Our word for toy, some say, is a unique word, doesn't come from anything. Because when I went to check my definition of the word for a toy and look at it in other languages, I discovered that the one for English said, we don't know, unknown origin. But that's pretty silly. In German, the word is Spielzeug. And Spielen is to play, and Zeug is stuff, things. So in French, of course, it's joujou. Count on the French for some cute little thing. And the word for behind that is jouer, which means to play. Russian is igrushka. Igrats means to play in Russian. Igrushka is something, and igrushechka is a little tiny one underneath it all. But with that as just a background, let's look at some of the oldest things I could find. Let's look at, first of all, now this picture here, this is the cover to a lovely song by Victor Herbert. That's not so ancient, that's the early 1900s. But you can see the pictures on there. You can have up in the right corner, you have a train, an old-fashioned train. In the middle up there, there's a drum. And then you have a stuffed toy. The stuffed toys didn't come in all that early. You know, in the early days, well, what did you stuff them with and how did you sew them up and all that? But as you move on down there, we have also a soldier, and between the animals and the human being forms, those have always been very popular. The first toys are considered really to have been little clay versions or drawings on the wall like the famous caves in France. Those are based, of course, on real animals. And that's the only way you recognize when some of these things are toys, is how they're made. But down then in the corner, you have a little hobby horse on a stick, you know, horse head on a stick, probably with jingle bells on it. And over on the other side now, you have a rocking horse, and that's also nice. So the earliest thing that I got a line on will be the next picture we see, please. And this picture shows an elephant of an early day, elephant that maybe looks even like an old mastodon. I don't have the exact date for this picture, but when you see it, it reminds me very strongly of the Iceman, you know, the famous Iceman from the caves. And there was a sort of a gunny sack-like cloth involved there. and he was stuffed with dried grass. Some things he had there that required stuffing. And this one, you see exactly that. And it looks, you know, not quite. Now, maybe the person who made it, or maybe in the course of the years, the trunk got a little changed, but it looks to me like a mammoth.
It does.
And if it is as old as the Iceman, it's at least 5,000 BC. So that's a pretty early one, and a very lifelike
Yes.
representation. Then another picture will show us someone. We'll go through these pictures fairly quickly. This was found by archaeologists in the Ukraine, and this goes way, way back. This represents a little cow. We don't know why it's striped in particular, but it's obviously a toy. What else would you use it for? It's not a type image you would use in a religious service of any kind or worshiping. Our darling little Ukrainian cow. Another picture, we'll go right on here, and we see this is a cat, supposed to be a cat. This is ancient Egypt, and by ancient here I mean, I don't have an exact date for it, but it is at least 2nd millennium BC, and the cat was very important in their worship services. It's not on wheels or anything, it's standing on its own little platform, so apparently no child pulled it along, but obviously it's some decorative, or you could play with it. And the next picture we are, I believe, going to be in Mexico. This is ancient Mexico from archaeology. A dog. I'm not sure I would have recognized it as a dog. But meanwhile, the wheel has come into use. And there it is on these little sort of cookie wheels, cookie-like wheels. Proceeding on to another one. This one is older. This one is Greek. It represents a horse. Again, it's on wheels. And that's about, in the 900s BC. So on we go to the next, and the next shows us a Viking horse. Nothing but a plain, ordinary hunk of wood. But you could imagine some child with a plain, ordinary hunk of wood doing as much imagination and playing and loving it as when this teddy bear that's sitting here before us was petted and loved. Crudely carved, but no doubt about what it is. Proceeding onward, what we have the ancient Rome. This is the first known doll that was articulated, that has joints, real joints that work. If you can zero in on the head for a moment, it has a lovely head on it, which looks as though it might be bronze. And the rest of the body looks tall and slender. And it reminds you a little of, in fact, it looks something like the Barbies of today. And the Romans, of course, as you know, were sophisticated people at the height of the Roman Empire. So that's one of the first dolls. There are others that are from Egypt that are earlier, known to be earlier than that. But now this doll, we're coming forward to the 1700s and 1800s, and this is one of the bisque dolls, made probably in the eastern part of what became East Germany, where Dresden is, and the very famous, beautiful pottery, porcelain and things, and the glaze on it, and the blush in the cheeks was a trademark of those particular dolls. A doll my mother had, a large doll. She was about a yard long. She had a face beautifully made like that. In her case, the eyes really moved. Mechanized things were beginning to come in a little bit.
Right.
But in this one, they didn't. But the lovely little lips and the hair, probably real hair that they braided for that. Now here we're in the 1200s AD, the age of chivalry, medieval age. And you see, it looks as though made out of clay, perhaps even by a childish hand, because I'll show you one that I made as a child that's not bad. But this one, the tail is too big, the head is good, the rider is sitting on it, and a wooden piece, when it was found, it had a the remains of a wooden piece in there representing a lance. So when these little children today play with these toys, gallop on, or when you see these things on television, these shows of the old medieval, well, it's got an ancient ancestor. And these wouldn't have just been one or two. Here's one from ancient Rome, and look at those heavy wheels. I don't know if I'm imagining it, but maybe it's the influence of machinery that began then, primitive machinery, and of the Roman battle. No, they didn't have tanks exactly, but they had juggernaut type things. And the heavy wheels might be related to that. And here's one. This is somebody driving a chariot. Now, they're supposed to be horses. They don't look like it. It looks like pretzel dough, in fact. The wheels do too. But this goes way, way back, and probably slightly BC. And here now, abrupt change. We have an animal toy, such as were made long, long ago. But the rubber ducky has actually been a word in our language anymore. And you can see little children playing with an early version of these any old time, you know, back in a castle, a medieval castle, or somewhere in ancient days in a riverbed somewhere. Puppets, this is a form of dolls that require a lot of imagination. Later, of course, the puppets came along, the string puppets, and they required a lot fancier manipulation. And this was invented by actually,
slinky.
This is quite a modern one. This was actually searching, during World War II, searching for artificial rubber that would be firm and strong as well. But the way I read it, the scientist doing that was working on it, and he had something, a coil, on, and it fell off and squirmed around and did these things. And I gave that toy, I don't know how many times, to children, and invariably the children would be hooked on it right away. And the adults too. Hey, look what it's doing. It's flying. It's slinking.
Down the stairs.
And his wife named it a slinky toy. Jacks was a very popular game at one time.
Right.
That's not an ancient game. Of course, using a little ball in an ancient game is, which we'll see in just a moment. But jacks, my mother was a fiend on it. It was still popular, at least at the end of the 1800s. I haven't seen so much lately, but when I looked it up, there are societies where they get together and play jacks, and they have championship adults.
Well, there's some complicated jack games.
But you have to sit on the floor. In fact, this picture is good. It shows the floor. If you do it right, you have to sit on the floor, and we become less and less willing to sit on the floor. So onward, this is more modern. So this is a view of Lincoln logs. Lincoln logs were invented by the son of Frank Lloyd Wright, famous architect. But I can remember sets of those lying around the house, the days of my brothers, and using them and playing them. And nothing can quite surpass actually doing this and then picking up a roof and putting it on and it fits. You know, you really, well, you learn to build.
Sure.
I think we have a picture of a modern set of that is, this one actually is a set from the 1920s. It was one of the first, but they've stayed pretty much the same. Toys tended to get educational in the 1800s. Now, here's one. I don't know if you can
it looks like
zero in on it a little bit. I could not make this any bigger, but this is Chinese from the 1st or 2nd century AD. And the children they have a small ball, you can see there perhaps, and they're batting it around with a little paddle. And guess what that's the ancestor of? Ping pong.
Ping pong, yeah.
So if you we used to love ping pong. Every other year or so we'd get a new ping pong set, for one of us would. They played with marbles in ancient Rome, ancient Egypt as well. They were made of stone. And we used to what they called lagging marbles, where you tossed them rather than where you shot them this way. But they, of course, did that. Eventually, that gave rise to throwing things like the discus, became very famous in the Greek days. Later on, of course, boomerang, weapon of boomerang, and then the things today, the frisbees, had such a wild popularity. Looking now at a couple of more things, of course, we have some soldiers here. These are Scottish Regiment, and this goes not as far back as you might think, but it does go back to Egyptian days, but they were not anywhere near as true. They weren't specific ones or of course they didn't. They had identifying marks, but not. There wasn't much there to imitate if you could do it out of clay or wood. The Greeks were a little more into making them specific, and of course they would play with them, and they would dream up stories. And I think it was largely in Scotland these things that inspired, like Sir Walter Scott's novels and all kinds of things. Even now, occasionally there will be a period movie that will have that in it. This hootenanny over here now, the hootenanny, we can probably all recognize the hootenanny. This is what it, when you look down on, this is what you saw. And you had a piece of paper, you had to buy a special pack of paper, and when it ran out, you had to cut your own. And it had these little things, you had a little crank that you turned here, and it turned this piece. This was a piece in two sides. It's a little rusty, I haven't been using it all that much. But you took these two, and you can see it has holes, and you could set them, and we just tried something. The pencil wouldn't stick, but you could see what it would produce. It would produce symmetrical patterns.
Now, there's a game like that now, and I can't remember the name
Oh, there
of it.
is? Ah.
Very similar. And I've forgotten what they call it now, but it draws all sorts of patterns on it.
Yeah, well, you could also do a circle on it if you wanted to by just setting it across the middle. And your pencil had to stick down here, and you pressed on it as hard as you could, and you turned this crank. Oh, thank you. You turned the crank, and it would go around. You have to let it go around a little bit. Here, yeah. Yeah. And the pencil, see, the pencil's doesn't want to stick through for some reason today. It's trying, but you can do all kinds of different things. And this was one of those unique things. This existed, I think, for only one season, really. It was big, and everybody bought it. It was like, the Tickle Me Elmo fad, and some of those things that would come along. But this was a great, children could become hooked on this. And for a while, I was hooked on one myself. Now, you had all sorts of music-making things, drums, and a lot of jokes about the family. Bought earplugs for everybody else in the family instead of that. But these charming little things, little music boxes of any kind, were always very popular. But here's one, the one we just looked at. This is the little skaters on the pond. Actually, there were several. And you could get into the little works of it. And you could have, and here you had
A little ballroom dance.
yeah. Yeah. Blocks have been a favorite for a long, long time. And these blocks, these are my original blocks. They look so small now, but I guess for really small children you do that. But these blocks, talk about being edgy. The poor child, it was insidious. The child couldn't help but learn something because all 6 faces of the block had something educational. Here you had one, this was from a fairy tale. This doesn't show up very well. They've been worn well. This one shows popular toy, shows a
rocking horse.
Rocking horse. This was part, you had to find, this is the middle of a sailor.
So you had to find the rest of
and
the
you had to
blocks.
find, on 2 of these blocks were the rest of it, and you had to find those. Of course, you learned colors. You learned 8, 7, 6, and so on. They all each had
You
their
had the
number
8
of
dots
little
where you could
dots
count it.
for it. This one I spent hours playing with, because if you took some of these together, well, you could put them together this way and get this kind of a basic pattern, and you'd look on the back and you'd see 2 toys pictured, but you had 2 of them there, or you could line them up so that they slanted. I hope some of you remember doing this, because I can remember so clearly playing with these. Here's number 1. Let's see, what did I get? All 6 of them. Oh, it's one with a clock on it. Oh, this is from a popular tale. Mary Had a Little Lamb. There was one of those on everything. And of course, you could build with them. And once again, and I used to build what my brothers called the Temple of Mush Mush. I would build a temple and around it like this. Whoop. And then build another layer on top. And of course, you could get it pretty high and then knock it down.
Oh, of course. That's the whole purpose in building them.
But what I used to like
my great-grandkids still do that.
Really? Oh, God, glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. This bear that I mentioned, now talk about crudely made. This was made in the 5th or 6th grade in grammar school. And we were given lumps of clay and told, make something. And we had, I think, just had some kind of a nature study. And anyway, I made this bear. And then they had them all glazed, or whatever you call it. This is gunmetal. My mother lovingly fixed it. One ear got broken off. But see, that's recognizable as a bear.
Sure.
And that goes way, 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 way back to the earliest things. Some of those little pictures we looked at back there. Things like the nutcrackers. We see lots of nutcrackers around us here.
Yeah.
They are a useful object that turned into something useful. Now, we had all kinds of other things that we can't really show here. Hoop rolling, for example, was very popular at one time. And the only hoop rolling I know now is Wellesley College. The seniors have to roll hoops in the spring. They have a hoop race. And it's not easy. I tried. You have a kind of stick, and you have this hoop, which is, well, probably waist high on you at least, and you have to run with it a certain course.
Oh, I've seen pictures of that.
And
yes.
you have to keep it going, because you can't reach it with your hand probably. If you could, you'd knock it over. But you have to do that, which is really pretty amazing.
I wonder if that's where the hula hoop came from. The hoop looks about the same.
Yes, probably. That somehow the hoop got put back into, people noticed it again. I'm almost counting books, because some books are really like, particularly the ones that opened up. Remember the books we had where you
Yes,
opened a page
had a
and some
picture.
folded out? Those required a lot of imagination too. And any kind of a wheeled thing now that wasn't just strictly for transportation, but that you could play with and move around yourself, like, toy tools, like toy fire engines, and that sort of thing that you could actually sit on, are really big. I don't see so much of that going around. Anytime I've been in a neighborhood with children lately, I've not seen it, because I do think most of them are inside on the TV, looking at some kind.
A lot of them are, yes.
Goodness knows it is remarkable to have that. But as things became more and more, well, not just mechanical, but almost magical from having the. But the favorite toys. Now, the favorite toys in other countries tend to be different. But the most basic toys, which I think are the animals and the human figures of whatever kind it is, and the ones where you can actually move and do something and build something. balls up to a certain extent, but not where they involve a game, say a competitive game, would be somewhat different. But did you have a favorite?
Favorite toy?
Yeah.
I don't know that I did.
I think
I did a lot of running around outside.
Yeah. Well, people have been doing it. I think it's an interesting reflection on the human creature that even very early, in fact, even before it split off, you know, to our Neanderthal and the other things, I think they had dolls too. Mm-hmm. Archaeology shows more and more of these things. Mm-hmm. They had things. I saw one from the people in that land of Western Russia and the steppes region of Russia. Mm-hmm. The toys that was obviously a toy. In those cases, I think it was a toy weapon of some kind in there, obviously too small. But the Russian toys, the doll, the famous doll, with all of the just smaller and smaller and smaller, all sitting inside
the nesting
each other,
dolls.
did that. And Russian toys, wonderful wagons and carts and things. Costumes up to a certain extent. Any doll, like those Roman articulated dolls, were the first dolls that had changeable wardrobes. Mm-hmm. Were known to do that.
And paper dolls.
Well, paper dolls. Mm-hmm. Yeah, paper dolls, you can do a lot with them. But somehow the real things, and that you identify with them, you know, like your teddy bear.
Sure.
It's not a
That's right.
outside creature. It's a very real creature. And they've stopped really saying boys' toys or girls' toys. I went in to buy what I was really looking for was a video, and it might have been 10 years ago. With the videos, where you couldn't get them on every corner, and I had a particular one in mind. And the first thing they said to me, "Is it for a girl or a boy?" And I said, "It's for a child."
Right.
And it didn't matter, but they finally came around. But walking through a toy section now, you see so many, and a lot of other types of things that we haven't gone into.
I think they're getting back to a lot of the toys that require imagination to use, even if they're the electronic type. It still requires their imagination in developing them. So I think we're getting back to some of that.
Well, even things like doll houses or a farm set with the farm animals.
Right.
That you can do a lot with too.
Okay.